Over the last period, we've been focusing very much on our 6 reasons why people buy property in their super. And I think why is important, but eventually, once you've covered the why and people are like, okay, that's cool, very naturally, people arrive at the, well, how? So let's cover the how today. There's 3 ways that you can go about setting up a self-managed super fund for you and your family. Well, the strategy number 1 is DIY. You can do the DIY version and you can do a DIY self-managed super fund setup. The second one is what we would call the general advice route. So you'd get some general advice and you would work with a company and engage a company that would help you to actually set up the self-managed super fund. And then the third version is you would get actual personal advice from a financial planner, and they would do what's called an SOA, a statement of advice that takes into account your specific circumstances. They'd review your entire financial situation, give you advice, and they wouldn't just give you advice on the setting up of the self-managed super fund, but they would give you advice across your whole finances. DIY super is like DIY everything else. Generally, you go a DIY route because you're looking to save some cash. You're looking for the cheapest possible option. And DIY definitely does do that. It sets you up to pay the lowest amount of money to set up a self-managed super fund for you. It does come with some challenges though. And the first area of challenges, it's DIY. So there's no one to call. There's no one to help you through the process. You are on your own. It is cheap and cheerful. But if you walk into problems or challenges, then you also need to solve and resolve those on your own as well. In my experience, who is that ideal for? Well, it's ideal for people who are sophisticated. You've got to be sophisticated enough to understand, like, there are responsibilities when you set up a self-managed super fund. And if you're going to do that on your own, you wear those responsibilities 100% on your own shoulders. So yes, you're going to save money, but you definitely need to be more sophisticated in your understanding of super and how it works. And if you're like, okay, well, what does sophisticated mean? If you're a sophisticated investor, if you have to ask that question, then you're probably not a sophisticated investor. So you probably don't tick that box. And the other thing is you need time. You need time because you need to do your own groundwork and study, whether it's on YouTube or whatever it may be. You need to study and learn on your own to figure out how to go through and do the process. And you also need to make sure that, you're compliant, you're doing everything correctly, and there's no one to fall back on and no one to help you with that process. So that's the DIY route, right? And then, so what are you looking at in terms of cost? That's probably sub 2K. There's some places out there, 1,300, 1,400, $1,000, whatever it costs. It's cheap and cheerful at the bottom end. You're doing that because you want to save money, but you definitely are going to require much more of you and yourself. Like I said, reserved very much for people who are sophisticated investors and understand the self-managed super fund space. If that's not you, it's probably not for you. And I have seen students go down that route and dig themselves into a pretty deep hole and end up with some challenges that they need to resolve, and it's not pretty. And in the worst cases, in the extreme cases, then they need to go and get advice and pay money to fix the problems that they've actually created through their own lack of knowledge and using the DIY route. So it's definitely an option, right? Is it for everyone? Absolutely not. So in the middle tier, you can get general advice. So the good news about this is you're now engaging an external company. They're helping you through the actual setup process, especially if you're purchasing property. They'll help you to set up the necessary structures. They'll help you with the actual rollovers. They'll help you through the process. So they provide general advice and they provide support and team to help you to set up and establish your self-managed super fund. They'll do a lot of the heavy lifting. They'll get you across all the documentation and they'll help and guide you through that process. So, like, who is this for? Well, from a cost perspective, what do the costs actually look like? You're probably in that, from if you think of DIY as 0 to 2,000 or 2,000 and below, the more generalized advice option is probably between 4 to 7K is probably what you're spending to get that done. Because remember, when you're setting up the self-managed super fund, there's multiple entities that need to be created, and each of those come with a cost. So there is hard cost, and then obviously you're paying the company for their help and support to get you through that. And these are general guides in terms of costs. Obviously, it can vary from there very much. But who is this for? This is probably for most people who are looking to set up a self-managed super fund. You may not need more sophisticated direct advice. You may not want to broaden your advice into all areas. This is suitable for most people. And then at the top end, you can get an actual, specialized statement advice for you and your family in your situation. And this definitely becomes, if your situation is more complex, then this route is ideal. If there's going to be a large number of trustees, so because you can have up to 6 now. So if you're going to have like 4 to 6, then this is probably a route that's better designed for you. And especially if you've got a lot of other things going on, if there's, strong retirement considerations that need to happen, then you'd want to get, the top end, advice to get that covered. And that's probably, 5 plus in terms of cost getting set up. Because if you have 4 people, then each of those 4 people need to get individual statements of advice regarding the setup. If you have 6 people, they all need to get individual advice regarding the setup and how it impacts them. So the costs definitely go up, but when you have multiple people, it's worth consideration. So in a nutshell, there's generally 3 direct routes that you can choose: DIY, general advice, or specialized personal advice, where you would get an actual statement of advice, right? From a cost perspective, at the cheap end, cheap and cheerful, sub 200. At the middle tier with your general advice, anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, and then at the top end, if you're looking for that specialized advice, that's generally 5K plus, and it can go up depending on how sophisticated and how many statement of advices are required. The cost can definitely vary. So guys, that's how you choose the how, right? Well, that is the how for getting your self-managed super fund. 3 options, 3 doors. You choose which one you feel is best for you. Choose wisely, be smart. And it's not always about those upfront dollars, guys. Sometimes, people balk at the cost, but things cost money, and some people do need to get genuine advice to make sure that it's set up correctly. And and DIY is not for the faint-hearted, guys. It might be low in upfront dollar cost, but it can be very high in back-end cost in terms of your time, your effort, your decision-making, and you making sure you get things done very correctly. But the good news is you have choice. You just need to choose wisely.